Look at what's happening with this woke culture in our schools, wanting our kids to decide their gender. I look at
so the ideology leads to the castration of children, and therefore
this wacky gay activists want to drive the White House, the Democrat Party, gay media like CNN into this arena of demonizing concerned parents.
Millions of Americans tune in to Fox News and see clips like this, and in turn they just kind of parrot whatever the news anchors say. And I've seen my own dad just sitting on the couch, having this in the background while scrolling on his phone, not really paying attention, but still kind of absorbing the information. And what this leads to is people just kind of end up saying whatever the anchor says without doing their own research or really even questioning it at a surface level. And this causes them to believe that other people living in the society that they live in don't deserve the rights that they have. And with these right-wing news programs, that ends up being a lot of the times the LGBTQ community. Now, the degrading comments that are made towards us not only affect just trying to live day to day and survive, but also the members of our community who are victims of violent crimes. Now, recently it's really been the trans community. At least that's what I've seen the most of. And the media coverage of trans victims for violent crimes is not really great. A lot of trans victims usually get their victimhood swept aside, kind of denied. They get dehumanized, and the media ends up just making it to where their lives seem disposable or replaceable, which leads people in the society to believe that being gay or being any type of LGBTQ is something that should be feared, leading to something I've seen coined as queer terror. Adding on to this, in the US, about 30 states allow something called the LGBTQ plus panic defense. Some sources also call it the gay and trans panic defense. Some call it LGBTQ plus panic defense. Either way, same thing. It boils down to a heterosexual individual, which is the defendant, is being charged with the violent crime towards a member of the LGBTQ plus community. Now, a lot of times what they'll do is claim that unwanted advances onto them, so like hitting on them, caused them to lash out, become violent, and lose control somehow. But if that wasn't enough, there's also a lot of systemic problems, a lot of structural problems with laws and bills that are being passed. Laws, bills, policies, all targeted at our rights. A lot of trans rights recently, like bathroom bills, have been heavily debated. Sports bills have been heavily debated. A lot of things that seem really, really, really small, but they're still trying to take away our rights little by little, and eventually the little things don't seem so little in comparison to some of the shit they try. An example of some of the bills that they're passing are Georgia SB 36, which allows discrimination under the guise of freedom of religion. There is Idaho H0059, which allows doctors or even the hospital itself to deny patients treatment because of religious reasons. I believe in the law itself there are other reasons stated, but religious is the first and key point. But it also gives insurance companies the ability to do the same thing. And then there's also Utah HB 0283, which asserts that a parent's approval or disapproval of their child's sexual orientation or gender identity is not grounds for any custody dispute. So if you had a really, really homophobic and transphobic parent that had custody, and the really, really accepting parent wanted custody, they couldn't use that as an example in court as to why the other parent shouldn't have custody, even though there is a good chance that the child would be being abused in some way, shape, or form. Now, those are 3 examples of tens of hundreds of bills that have been passed against us so far. As of March 9th, 2025, which is when I wrote the script that I'm reading off of, 57 bills have been passed against just specifically trans rights. And there are still 745 that are being actively reviewed by legislators. 745 bills being reviewed against trans rights currently. If you know someone that is part of the trans community, whether it's like a friend, whether it be your family, a coworker, even your partner, be there for them. This is a really, 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 really scary time. And it really doesn't look like it's going to be getting better. Make sure that if you see this type of shit propping up within your community, these types of bills being drafted in, contact your lawmakers, petition them to not implement them. There is already currently a 40% statistic of transgender US adults reporting at least one lifetime suicide attempt. And that's just attempts. Fortunately, it's just attempts. I don't know the statistic for deaths on that, but this is one of many, many things that contributes to such a high statistic for attempts. Of course, there's other factors like social factors and environmental factors and economic factors. Of course, there's many, many more factors, but this one is one of the bigger chunks of the reasonings. Just like imagine having to open your phone and look at the news, and you see in the news that they are making laws against you for simply trying to exist, for simply just trying to live your own life in peace. There was a study published by the Springer Publishing Company, which is a German publishing company of economic journals, medical journals, a whole slew of things. And they found out that their findings in the study were basically states with more state-level transphobia, which is just transphobia that stems from laws and bills that are passed, result in a higher rate of suicidality, whether that be suicide attempts, suicide ideation. It increases it, which seems like kind of obvious information, but it is nice to see that there is some research being done about it. But the problem doesn't just stop at the bills being passed, but it's also previous protections that have been in place that are now being taken out of place. For some examples, there was Title IX, specifically under the transgender and gender diverse students, transgender and gender diverse students protections, which was taken away recently. I believe it was recently by Donald Trump. There was also executive orders that were made by Joe Biden during 2022 to protect transgender students, which were also rescinded by Donald Trump basically immediately after he was sworn into office. And there's been also a lot of contention recently with sports. To name a few, there is the Riley Gaines Act, which has been gaining a lot of popularity, which currently in Georgia, it is, I believe, up to Governor Kemp right now to sign that in, and it's not really looking too promising for him to veto it, so that is probably yet another one that will be added to the list. But also, there's been a clip that's been making the rounds recently of a fencer that took a knee because her opponent was a transgender woman. Now, for context, fencing is a co-ed sport, so there's no division between men and women. This specific fencer, she had matched against men before. She had beaten men before. This was not an act of what conservatives are trying to mask as an unfair advantage. This was pure transphobia. There was nothing here that was even remotely about this sport. It was just malice. There's also, for more examples, I've seen shit with dart throwing and even billiards of people claiming that trans people have an unfair biological advantage. Sports that don't even require anything about your biological sex to work. But all of this to say, this is a really dark time to be living. I'm specifically covering my community, the LGBTQ plus community, because I love and care for this community. I want to see our youth prosper, me included, especially future generations down the line. Seeing bills passed against my friends, my family, it hurts to see. And it's getting more and more apparent, as if it wasn't already crystal clear, that this country isn't really attuned to anyone that isn't cisgendered, heterosexual, white, and male. And it's looking really dark. And I know it's going to get worse. We have 4 years of Trump. He's made it very clear that he doesn't want us to exist, which leaves us with one option, which is to fight. Whether it be protesting at your local courthouses, protesting just in the street in general, gather some of your friends, get them to gather their friends, and so on and so forth. March and rally for your rights. More than that, if you're too scared to march, if you're living in a place where it's unaccepting and you just feel like you need to stay in the closet, survive. Living is currently one of the best forms of rebellion that we can do. They do not want us to be happy. They do not want us to survive. We have to survive. I know that it's dark. I know that it doesn't look like it's getting any better. But we need to fight. Stay safe.